Okay, guys, we're gonna get started now. Just want to give a quick introduction. The video of DRI has been going around for a couple of years now, and we finally took a little bit of initiative to study it a little bit more. I'm gonna introduce Jeff. His name is Jeffrey Shudai. He's the inventor of DRI. He's gonna tell us about his product. He has a little routine he's gonna do, but then he's gonna be here to answer any questions.
Hello, we're going to go ahead and start the video. The reason for doing the video first is because if I started talking to you first, you probably wouldn't believe me. So we're going to hear from some farmers who use DRI, and then we'll talk about it. Go ahead.
DRI stands for Deep Root Irrigation. It's a conveyance system that hooks onto the drip emitter. It's basically a soaker hose, conveys the water underground. The benefit is that you're placing the water where the roots are. There's no top moisture for evaporation, so it makes your application of water reduced a minimum of 25 to 30%. Over another year, roots are going to grow where the water source is. They've been able to cut the water consumption as high as 50, 60%.
Name's Brian Maestri, work for SMD Vineyards in the foothills of the Santa Lucia Highlands. We are growing 80 acres of Pinot Noir grapes. We have been using DRI for 3 years now. Been working awesome. We have limited water supply. With the DRI, we probably can cut it in half. It goes directly down to the spot where we need it with no runoff. The emitters that we have without DRI, it takes 3 hours to get it saturated. For DRI, within 30 minutes, we already see it getting saturated. We have probes that are in the soil at different depths that are readings going to your cell phone. And it tells us when the water is getting at all those different levels. And it really helps us manage our water. We're delivering fertilizers 3 times a year through it. No issues whatsoever. It works perfectly fine. We haven't seen any plugging, anything like that. And we know the fertilizer is being used properly, getting down to the roots instead of just sitting on top of the soil. There are definitely less weeds present. All of our wells are running off diesel, so we use less diesel. We can run them instead of 3 hours, we're only running them 1 hour. Our experience with DRI has been great.
My name is Jason Melvin. I'm the vineyard manager at Zabala Vineyards. We're located in Monterey, California. We are growing wine grapes, predominantly Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. This will be my second season with DRI in place, and it's a new vineyard development. I'm saving about 50% of the water. I'm in very sandy and rocky soils, so standard irrigation is a couple times a week. With the DRI, I can extend that 1 time a week or once every other week. So it's getting the same standard fertilization treatment through the DRI. We have not observed any issues doing it that way. Since we're irrigating less frequently, the pumps are operating less time, and then we're seeing a savings on energy. So far, I have no issues. I like what I'm seeing, and more than likely, we will expand the use of DRI.
My name is David Blumhoff, and we are here at one of our orchards. We're a family business. We've been in almond growing for at least 50 years. We've been using DRI for the last 3 years. This gives us the ability to place the water exactly where it's needed. The orchard we're actually in, through its first year, we use 4 inches of water. With a dual line drip or fan jet, we at least do an acre foot. So early on, we're 70% less. The booster pump that we normally would use to boost it in, we're running less hours. So we're seeing a savings on that. We're also seeing the benefits in weed control. And even when I fertilize, we're fertilizing right at the source and the roots. You just need a single hose that you would put your emitter into, and that's where you would hook the spaghetti hose and the DRI into the ground. So it's nothing special. If I have a question mark if one's working or not, I stick this electronic probe in the ground and it will give me a reading of how much moisture is there. My experience with DRI has been very good.
My name is Rick Benson. I'm a farmer down in the Imperial Valley, Southern California. I have olive trees. I've been using DRI for 3 years. I installed it when I planted the trees, and they have kept up growth with the micro sprinklers and the drip lines and the flood irrigation, but they've only used about 10% as much water. 1/10 of the cost. I farm in a dry desert. Eliminating evaporation through a hot summer is a remarkable feat.
Anyone that's dealing in the state of California and dealing with sigma and water issues, I would definitely recommend.
I would recommend DRI to other growers.
It allows us to grow more of our ground instead of setting it fallow.
To me, DRI it's the future of irrigation.
Okay, those were all young trees. We're going to show you a PowerPoint presentation that shows you more of the mature trees that are being used with DRI. Name of the company is Deep Root Irrigation. Just so you know, I'm not a public speaker. I know a lot about DRI. My son and I developed this product, and we've worked with some of the best ag scientists in California over the past decade. Some of the benefits that we found out early on, when we designed DRI, the purpose for it was just to develop deeper root growth. That was it. We started realizing that farmers came to us and they said, hey, I'm saving energy and water, and they're saying that I'm not getting more mineral buildup on my emitters. They're saying that it reduces weed growth. Those are all benefits that came to us after farmers started using it. This is just a simple concept of what happens with DRI. Put it in the ground, it starts building a bulb of saturation, the roots grow into the bulb of saturation, the plant grows. We actually make 4 different sizes. The 2 in the middle, the DRI 12 and the DRI 6 are the only ones that you'll ever have to think about. The other ones are for landscape applications. Okay, this is going to show you water coming out of a DRI 6 unit by a rose plant. The reason why I included this is because some people just, until they actually seen water coming out of it, they really didn't know what it was supposed to do. We had people that when we first told them about DRI, they wanted to test it immediately. This gentleman who conducted this test, he owns Coastal Viticultural Consultant, really highly esteemed in Napa Valley, California. This is a standard printout using neutron probe to show a column of soil. Now this is a column of soil right here, okay? That's his benchmark column of soil at 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, 4 feet. When he started applying water over 6 hours, it shows the increase at each level using drip irrigation. And you can see that after 6 hours of irrigating, at the 1 foot depth, he was able to increase the water saturation ratio by a plus 0.16 inch of water, okay? At a 2 foot depth, he got a 0.08. At a 3 foot, a 0.02, and 4 foot, 0.02. He ran the exact same test with DRI. Matter of fact, he ran the test 5 times because he didn't believe it. So with DRI at a 1 foot depth, he got an increase of plus 0.32. At 2 inch, he got an increase at 0.46. 3 foot, plus 0.40. He did better at 4 feet than what drip was able to do at 2 feet. And when we look over here, the total available water in the active root zone with DRI, 5.29 inches of water in the active root zone. When you look at drip, 2.75. Now, the one thing that we don't show on this report is how much water he used versus how much water DRI used. DRI used about half as much water in that test. I know that because I was there. What you're looking at right here are Centec images. Centec is a soil moisture probe that when you put it in the ground, you put 2 of them, and they take a reading between them, and they'll tell you exactly how much moisture you've got in the ground, and they display it like this. What's interesting about this is that we're seeing drip irrigation, the wet patterns, and we're seeing DRI. Now, the drip irrigation, when you read the report by this was an independent test. We didn't have anything to do with it. Jack Coots, president of Professional Grower Services, came in for the farmer and conducted this test. These are the results. Over here, it took 9 hours for drip irrigation to make this. That's drip irrigation, the wet pattern. DRI, they turned it in 9 hours. It actually did much more than this, but we've turned this off at 4.5 hours. DRI used 2.84 gallons per vine compared to 7.38 gallons per vine that was used over there. So we get a higher degree of saturation and better penetration and longer holding power using a fraction of the water. We're going to get into that a little bit later. Right now, just showing you some of the reports. Cal State Fresno is an ag school. They were the first ones to test DRI. What you're looking at here are almond trees. This is, I believe these are 4th leaf, but 3 years on DRI. 4th leaf almonds, 3 years on DRI. Of course, they only reduced the water use by 25% because they thought that was drastic. We told them that there were farmers out there cutting it a lot more than that. This is as far as they wanted to go with it. But even with 25% reduction, you can see that the trees look fantastic. You compare them on this row over here, we've got drip, DRI. DRI is keeping up with anything they were able to do with drip, no matter how much they cut it back. This is significant. This is at UC Davis. Now, some of you have probably never heard of UC Davis, but UC Davis, they kind of set the benchmark for agriculture and as far as academic review for agriculture in California and a lot of places around the world. So UC Davis tested DRI. What you're seeing on the left-hand side is a tree that's on DRI that has a 73% reduction in water compared to this tree that's on drip over here. The yield on these was almost identical, but we cut back the water over there by almost 75%. So the question is, how is that tree able to do it? How can the tree survive with that much drastic reduction? How can it survive and be healthy, and how can it still produce a consistent yield? And we're going to get into that. We had a farmer that said, hey, look, we need to see what's going on underground. So we ran this irrigation hose over an area that had never been irrigated all summer, and it was completely dry. This was hydrophobic soil, if you could ever find it. Very dense clay, hydrophobic soil. They ran the test for 6 hours. They used a 2 gallon per hour drip emitter on DRI. What you're seeing right here is 48 hours after the irrigation, they came with a backhoe and they dug down, and you see that bulb of saturation that was opened up there, and that was just with 12 gallons of water. Now, 48 hours later, they went over by drip, where they had applied 64 gallons during that same 6 hours, and 48 hours later, it had already evaporated. That's why we don't have any pictures of it. But I don't want any of you to rely on any of the data you see here. You can rely on your own data, okay? When you try this out, everybody's soil is different, everybody's water pressure is different, the contours of your property are different. But when you try DRI out, you're going to see for yourself, you'll have your own data. This is 72 hours later. Came back the third day, dug down by another DRI unit. This clay was so moist in the middle there that after they dug down like this, they grabbed some of that clay and they actually made a football out of it. That's how moist it was, how much water it was holding. There was only 12 gallons applied there. 12 gallons of water applied 72 hours later. The farmer said, okay, all right, this is clay soil. If it's clay soil, it holds water longer. But I've got some places that are very sandy. So I'm going to have these sandy places that dry out very quickly. I have the clay places that are holding the water. So he did a test, same test, on sandy soil. 92 hours later on sandy soil, this is a soil moisture monitor, Aquateer M350. You can see it has a reading of 75 on it. Well, what does that mean, 75? Keep in mind, it's 92 hours after the irrigation event. So when we look at the scale here, you've got clay, loam, sand. So we take sand and we come across where 75 is. That means that it was still wet 92 hours later in sand. So the question we have to ask ourselves is, how is it that we're using less water and it's lasting so doggone long? And okay, we're going to get into that. These are trees that were 4th year almonds that because of the drought in California, they were going to lose the entire orchard. In desperation, they put DRI on it, and this is what they looked like the following spring after they put DRI. The trees, you can see the top growth. Trees are doing fantastic, and they cut their water use by about 68%. I did a shot from a distance so you can see the consistent development of the trees. All right, this is up in Northern California, and these trees are a little bit older. These trees are on fan jets, and they're receiving 16 gallons of water per hour. This row over there was converted from the fan jet to DRI. Those trees over there are only receiving 4 gallons per hour, okay? The only thing that they found that was different in the trees was that the DRI trees actually came to fruit maturity quicker, and they were ready for harvest a little quicker. So they were actually happy about that. That's in Orland, California. You're going to see some stuff about vines, and you say, well, we don't want to know about vines, but it's going to show you some of the difference about what happens with DRI. This is rootstock for vines. They just grow these entire fields full of rootstock, and they pull the canes out of them. The thing that costs them a lot of money is when they start getting weeds in there and they get inconsistent growth of the vines. You see that line right down the middle there? Where you can see where he's pointing. You can see a slight discoloration there. It looks better on the right-hand side. The right-hand side is using about a third of the water, but it's on DRI. This is quick plant response with kiwi, DRI versus drip irrigation. These are plum trees. They were planted in October 18th, 2015. The pictures here were taken exactly 12 months later. This was on flood irrigation, a lot of weeds to deal with. That was just on DRI. They didn't do any weed abatement at all. So where DRI is, the weeds really don't grow. The average tree on DRI grew over 12 feet in the first 12 months. This same farmer that you saw the girl standing there, he put more DRI in. This is early spring. And he put the white sticks in, and they started to leaf out. But he decided he was going to put the DRI units 3 feet out on either side right away. Instead of having one that's close and one far away, he decided he was going to put them out. And he said, here we are. This was in early May. And he said, I'm just not getting the growth that I wanted. And I said, well, look, his name is Brad. I said, Brad, you have to make sure you're getting a really nice wet pattern under here and over there, but it's not right where the roots are. You're going to have to irrigate. You're going to have to run a 34-hour set or a long enough set so that we get water to your plant so your plant knows where the water is. So he did that. And farmer reports new growth after full soak of watering. This was less than a week later after he did that. All of a sudden, he's got all this new growth. So I went back there about 10 weeks later to see how the trees were doing. These are the same trees 10 weeks later, okay? And this is what they look like third leaf. The reason why I have this picture here is because whether you're irrigating trees or whether you're irrigating vines or whatever you're irrigating, if you have your irrigation so that you're supplying water and it's going downhill, you have to have a vent at the top. That's a vent right there. It's important to get the air out of the line. So what we do is we show you how to take a small amount of water and put the small amount of water in the ground, create a sustainable bulb of saturation that stays in the ground 4 to 5 times longer. And when you put your nutrients down in there and your plant finds that bulb of saturation, it takes less water to maintain that. All the evaporation is taken out of the equation. All the runoff is taken out of the equation. I was telling Diego, if you took a hypodermic needle and a syringe and you had the syringe filled with water and you tipped it downward and you pushed it so that a drip of water started coming out the bottom. The way a drip of water hangs at the bottom of that needle is exactly what we're talking about. The reason that drip hangs there instead of just flowing right out is because those water molecules are clinging together. They're holding on to each other, okay? If you had a little bit of air going down in there, it would immediately fall off. You'd break the surface tension, it would fall off. So what we do is we put, using our DRI unit like a hypodermic needle, we fill up the ground like that. And we don't have any air at the core of this, so the center of it is fully saturated. Then we have layers of lower saturation value that go out, because you saw the sphere, the round wet pattern when they did the backhoe. When we showed the cutaways, you were able to see a round wet pattern in the ground. What happens all the time is that the wet pattern becomes a sphere, it becomes round. So even if you've got irregularities in your soil, you give it some time, a few days, that wet pattern is going to become a perfect sphere. That's because water molecules cling together. At the center of it, it's fully saturated. There's no air in it. But as you work your way out from the center, the farther you get from the center, you get these saturation ratios that are lower saturation value until you come out to ambient soil. So when your roots grow in towards it, they find an increased saturation or increased wetness, and they stop where the wetness is exactly what that particular plant needs. So for pecans, they'll grow into it until they find enough water, and that's where they'll stop. Why don't they grow all the way into the DRI unit? Because it's too wet. At the DRI unit, it's fully saturated, it's too wet. They find what they desire a little farther out. What we're seeing here is a small vineyard in the Napa Valley. This particular vineyard right here sells each bottle of wine for about $1,500. They switched completely to DRI. They didn't do it because they need to save water. They did it because they want their grapes to be the best grapes in the world. They want to have absolutely the finest label in the world, and they spare no expense. So they switched to DRI, and this is their second leaf, the second year, second season of these vines after they were planted. Perfect Cabernet clusters. This vine here has 9 clusters on it. The significant thing is that in wine country, you don't typically harvest until the 4th year, okay? Because you just can't get quality grapes. These grapes were so good that Grace Family Vineyards harvested these. They had a 98% take on them, and they put it in their ultra premium wine. They were able to achieve what they wanted to with DRI, perfect quality. So once you get it dialed in and you know, this is exactly what my trees need. My trees need this much water. They need this much nutrient. You never have to worry about, is it going to be a good year next year? You can replicate exactly what you did last year. You can have a consistent year by year yield, exactly the way you want it. These are olive trees. These are high density olives. This soil was so bad that they were thinking about tearing it all out. They put it on DRI. These trees have been on DRI for 2 years at this point. This is what it looks like under the canopy. So the DRI unit is actually wrapped in a saddle wrap right here to keep the hose from turning. It's on a drip emitter that's a flag emitter, but you can see that they really don't have any weeds. They don't use any weed abatement at this location at all. Weeds just don't grow underneath the trees. You can see that the trees, the weeds grow out there where, you know, it gets a little bit of rain, but we don't have any weed growth underneath the trees at all. That's a perfect tie right there. You don't have a lot of big loops where you can get caught on any equipment or anything like that. Takes about 30 seconds to install a DRI unit. Venting. We talked about how the core of our bulb of saturation is fully saturated. There's no air in it, just all water. It's very important to have a little vent like this at the end of your irrigation line. So when you turn the system on, it evacuates all the air. So that way, when the system gets filled with water, all DRI units are getting water at the same time. The last thing we want to do is be pumping water down into the ground. It's actually going to pump air down in. We don't want air going down in there and popping that bulb the same way when we talked about that drip. If you get air in that drip, it's going to break the surface tension, drip's going to fall apart. Real quick, these are young citrus, okay? And this was a bet. They put DRI on the ones on the left, and these are with fan jets. These over here use 30, 40 gallons per week per tree. Those over there are using 4 to 12 gallons per week per tree. DRI is accelerating past. Like once again, venting. Now we raise the vent on the end because air rises. And you don't want the water to get to the end of the hose before the air does. You want the air to go out and then the water to get there and seal it up. This is just showing you some mature citrus trees with DRI on the left, with fan jet on the right. They both produce great citrus. It's just that they're using a third less water on the left. That's actually the third less water. That was a very mild reduction by the grower. He could have done better than that. That's what I have right there. We have a lot more. I mean, we have literally thousands of customers. One of our problems is that when a customer finds out about DRI and they're using it, we don't usually get them to say, hey, I'll do a testimonial for you. Most of the time they're saying, you're not taking any pictures? You're not telling anybody. I don't want my competition to know. They can go through the same thing that I went through. And so that's what generally happens. So that it's made it tough for us. Word of mouth has gotten around, and it's finally gotten down to Mexico here, and that's why I'm here. At this point, I'd like to be able to answer any questions. Go ahead and ask me anything. I'm sure I've been asked it a dozen times before. Does anybody have a question?
So with our current irrigation systems right now, how would you hook that system up to them?
That's a good question. So what I've seen of your irrigation system so far, a solid set PVC that comes up out of the ground. Of course, every place where that riser is a place for air to collect, okay? Which means you'd have to put a vent there. So if you put a vent in every single one of those, you would do fine, except that would be cost prohibitive and vents all over the place. So what I recommend is that you run a new irrigation hose on the surface and you install DRI off of that with just one vent at the end. If you do that, your trees will be set for life. Okay, we got a couple over here.
Let me ask a question.
Go ahead.
What are downsets? Have farmers hit glitches that we could know about? Just problems that arise.
Okay, problems that arise. Okay, and the problem's usually when farmers don't follow the instructions. We tell them that you have to have a vent on the end, and they say, look, I've been irrigating for 40 years, 4 generations, I never use vents, okay? And so they don't put vents, and then they end up with carrot topping because they're pumping air down into the DRI unit. It fills up with air. It becomes like a bobber and works its way up through the soil. So when we say you got to put a vent on it, you got to put a vent on it. We tell you where to put it and where to bury it. And as a matter of fact, we want to be able to show you, we don't just sell you a product and say, good luck. Okay, so we're going to be training Diego so that he's going to become very proficient. And we're going to stay in touch with him with WhatsApp or FaceTime or whatever, so that way we can go out into your fields. Every time that you have a question or something like that, we can show you what you need to do to keep it on track. Our idea is not to tell you you've got to cut back on water. That's not what we're about at all. We know that in the future, the world is going to have more people, and those more people are going to be asking you to grow more food. What we're about is helping you plant more acres. With the water that you have, we can show you how you can plant. You can plant all these valleys, and right now you're worried about your groundwater. We're showing you how you can plant and you can sustain your trees on such a small amount of water, and we're talking healthy trees. We're talking trees that produce at least what you've ever gotten before, and if you dial it in, you should be able to get even better than anything you've ever gotten. That's what we're trying to tell you. We're trying to tell you that for the next 100 years, you can sustain everything that you've got plus everything that you haven't planted yet. We're trying to tell you that your groundwater will actually rise with a sustainable program like this. We're trying to tell you that right now, 80% of the water you're using is evaporating. It's wasted. We know that the farming methods that everybody uses around the world, they're the best farming practices that have always been available. So when we come up with something that works better, it's our responsibility to tell you about it. And it's your responsibility to decide whether or not you want to use it.
No, I was just noticing the comparisons you made to the drip tape. All that drip tape was on top of the soil. Or are you comparing it to drip tape? Because a lot of people around here use the drip lines as well, but they bury them a foot or half a foot under the ground as well.
Okay, so buried drip. And actually, buried drip is not a bad thing. Buried drip is much better than surface application. Now, when we've compared DRI with buried drip, when we look at the soil moisture profiles, we find that buried drip, when you bury it about 12 inches down, I want to show you something that's real important. Right here. Surface irrigation. Do you see that line right there? It's right at about 40 centimeters. 40 centimeters is about 16 inches. Everybody who surface irrigates is washing the fine silt down into the ground. And do you see how there's a level there that the water just doesn't want to penetrate past? That's called hard pan. It's because all the fine silts, every time you irrigate, they get washed down in the soil and they start to collect in the pores of the soil. And when all this fine silt gets jammed up in a small space there, it creates, well, a level there, which is hard pan, that's very hard for water to go through. Why is DRI going through it? Because we poked a hole in it. When we installed the DRI unit, we poked a hole in the hard pan, we stuck the DRI unit in, it started filling up below and it filled up above. And when the water is below the hard pan, believe it or not, it starts to dissolve it. And we get all those fine silts worked back up into the surface of the soil. So when we talk about irrigation that is very drip, most of your water is sitting right above that hard pan. Okay? So you're creating this zone of water, but it's in the top 16 inches of soil. The thing about the top 16 inches of soil is that it's very porous and it evaporates very quickly. So even though you're getting water in there and it's better than surface irrigation, it's not quite as efficient as creating a bulb of saturation.
I just have a question. When these fill up with dirt and sand, what happens?
Yeah, okay, so yeah, when we first came up with it, everybody said, oh, they're going to fill up with dirt and sand. When you run water through them, they're constantly rinsing out, constantly pushing away, constantly rinsing out. There's a positive pressure. And so we have taken them and actually put them in slurry and swirled them around and tried to get as much in there as we could. Every year we go back to early installations, we take them out and we cut them open and we look to see, do we have any root intrusion? Do we have any sediment growing in there? Do we have any mineral deposits? They're always perfectly clean. So why is it that we're not getting mineral deposit inside? Some people ask, mineral in my water. Why am I not getting mineral deposit? How many of you have ever bought mineral water in a bottle? I'm sure everybody has at one point. When you look at a bottle of water at the store and it's mineral water, you don't see mineral inside the bottle, okay? That's because the mineral, it stays in the water. As soon as you have air interface and any of that water evaporates, you start to get a ring of mineral in there. When we take DRI unit and we attach it to the irrigation line, we take air out of the equation. There's no more air. So the water and all the mineral that's soluble in that water passes right through the DRI unit and goes into the ground. And since the ground doesn't have any water in it by the DRI unit, we don't get any mineral buildup at all. We don't get any soil or sediment inside the DRI unit. We don't get root intrusion because it's too wet. The roots want to grow at a saturation value that's like somewhere right out here. They don't want to grow in this. This is too wet, which is why we put DRI units on two sides of the trees typically, and we leave two sides of the tree that isn't irrigated. That way, the tree has ample space for mining, for mineral, and for getting oxygen. Okay, we had another question.
A couple of the studies that you mentioned, the one from UC Davis, the ones from Fullerton. I'm a marketing expert. I can sell anything. I would like to see those studies and cross comparison from the studies done with DRI. Could you make those accessible? Or we can see, hey, these were unbiased studies done with this stuff. Could we have access to those?
I'm sure that Dr. Ken Shackle, he's with UC Davis. And just so you know, we originally wanted UC Davis to test our product. This was 8 years ago, and they wouldn't touch it. About 5 years ago, we wanted them to test it, and they wouldn't touch it, okay? So now, last week, UC Davis contacted me, and they said, we have growers from all over California that are contacting us because they've been using DRI, and they're wondering why the state doesn't have any information regarding DRI. Dr. Malika Anako, she's getting a $1.6 million grant to be able to write up all of the details about DRI. If you are in the United States, the United States Department of Agriculture already recognizes DRI, and they will give you $1,363 per acre to use DRI on your crops. So UC Davis is going to do a test, and that is going to be something that really solidifies it as far as the ag community, because they're kind of the pinnacle of academia. So, but I can make Ken Shackle, when he did these testings right here, he didn't write a report on it. He did collect some data, though, on yields and water use. I can make that available to you. And I can
just whatever information that comes from a study by a university, anything like that, to where, hey, it's a study that was developed, because obviously everything varies, like you say. But I'd love to know that. The other question is, I've noticed that they have a slit on them. So there's slits inside the tube.
Okay, so we We don't advertise the slit, okay? Because it's a new design feature, and it does some remarkable things. It's called fluting. Okay, so we found that we have some growers who have really low water pressure. You ask them how much water pressure you run, they said we're running 40 pounds. At the end of their line, they have maybe 2 pounds. And then we say, what are you running through for fertilizer? Oh, we only run liquid. And then we find out that they're running all kinds of stuff through there that actually gels up in the line. So by putting the fluting in there, the DRI unit will compensate for any variable. No matter what you run through it, if there's any pressure that builds up inside that DRI unit, those flutes open up like a gill on a fish. And they allow any solids in there to pass right on through. And the following water that comes right behind it just continues to rinse it out. We're real excited about the fluting on there. So that it evens the playing field. Doesn't make any difference what you're doing, where you're at, the DRI unit's always going to perform fantastic. Okay, so there's a couple of things I want you to know about me and about my company. We have 5 core values for my company. And so I believe that all invention, all inspiration comes from God. When this idea came to me, if I would have known that it was going to be half as hard as it was to start my business, I probably would have walked away from it. But when we tested DRI and we found how well it worked, I felt there was a responsibility. So we have 5 core values with our company: honor God, honor family, honesty, quality, and bless the world. The reason I'm coming down here is because I want you guys to have the benefit of DRI. I know it's going to help you, and I know that at some point in time, whether you do it now or you find out about it in 10 years from now when the rest of the world is using it, eventually you will all be using DRI. So I just came here to answer questions directly from you so that you can understand it. I have seen so many farms in California, 4th generation farms, where they're getting ready to quit. They're getting ready to sell the farm to some corporation. There's just not enough money. It's too much hard work and not enough profit. Started using DRI, where it changed everything for them, changed their profit margins dramatically. And so the 4th generation said, hey, not only sticking in, but I'm planting that other 1,000 acres that we've always talked about, because now I've got water budget to do it. So we talked about groundwater, okay, and what's happening with groundwater, not only here, but all over the world. Groundwater is receding, so it's a concern. We think about, okay, we've got enough water right now. What about 10 years from now? What about 50 years from now? What are we going to do? If you were able to reduce the amount of water you're using by just 50%, and I tell everybody 50% because it's easier for them to understand. If I would have told you in the beginning that we've got growers out there that have cut their water by 90%, you would have thought I was just some marketing ploy, okay? So the point is, we do have growers out there that have reduced it by 90%. And when I started going through some of the equations with Diego about how much water you guys apply and what we can do for you, we can easily attain a 50% reduction. I'm pretty sure 75% reduction is right there. And to be perfectly honest, if you were just asking my honest opinion, I think we can probably cut that in half. The point is, you can keep all your trees healthy. You can plant more ground. And here's the other thing. If the entire valley was planted, what does that mean for the valley? Everybody's going to say, oh, it's taking more groundwater, okay? No, it means that you're going to have more annual precipitation. Before I was in DRI, one of the projects I was working on was desalination technology with the United States Navy. The technology that we came up with was a technology where we took fresh water from the air. Okay, so I've got a really good understanding about taking air and turning it into water. When we talk about rain clouds that are coming over you, nothing worse than having rain clouds pass over you and just keep on going. Well, when you have barren ground that's just dirt, that ground is absorbing sun heat energy. And when the clouds are going over, you've got masses of heat. You've got heat columns that are rising up, and they're heating those clouds. Well, when a cloud is heated, it holds its water, and it keeps on going. If you had this entire valley covered with trees, you'd have more rain, more natural rain. Not only that, but if you use less water each year than what comes down from the mountains or the rain or whatever, your aquifers will fill up. We can show you how to use less water and grow everything that your trees want right now. Initially, we had people say, hey, you're only putting water on 2 sides of the tree, or you're only putting it on one side of a vine, that half that tree is going to die. The roots that are over here that aren't getting water, they're going to die. Well, what did they find? They found that was absolutely not true. We found that where the DRI units are, we actually started producing a set of primary roots growing on either side of the tree where the DRI units were. Once it got past the hard pan and the water, the ambient soil moisture that's down there, 5-6 feet, and the roots started tapping into that, some remarkable things started happening. We started finding out that there's untapped mineral deposits that are down there. A lot of our surface soil is mineral depleted, but if you can get down into some of that deeper soil that's never been tapped before, now you're talking about a whole new mineral content for your plants. And you're talking about getting them into the ambient moisture of the soil. Once the roots are down there, they rely less on surface water. But you still want to be able to build your bulbous saturation to get the nutrients that you want to your plant. But your trees will start growing deeper roots, better root network that goes down quite a bit, and you're going to see trees that are completely unfazed by really hot, dry weather. If you had a break in your irrigation schedule, right now, you'd have trees die. You want your trees to be in a place where they're like the trees in a park that really never get irrigated, or on the side of the road, you've got some trees that never get irrigated, but somehow those trees seem to survive. That's because those trees have roots way below that hard pan. They've got really deep roots. And all we're going to do is teach your trees to have deeper roots. Keep in mind, your trees are living organisms. We want your living organisms to find out where the water is. The root structure is going to change on your young trees. On your old trees, you have to apply DRI in 4 locations. But if you do that, the tree will be able to transition very easily from surface watering to DRI. If you want to transition a mature tree with only 2 DRI, you're going to have to go through at least 1 season with supplemental surface watering as well. You should be able to get that tree completely transitioned, because between irrigation schedules that are surface water, the tree knows where the water is and it's developing more and more feeder roots, capillary roots at that place. Any other questions? Yes.
A simple question. I was just curious on the filtration requirements. How fine of a filtration system do you need?
Does it make it through your irrigation system now? Don't worry about it. If it makes it through your irrigation system now, it'll go through DRI.
So a small amount of sand, sediment, silt, no problem?
Not a worry. You could run toothpaste through your system and it wouldn't clog the DRI unit, as long as you run water afterwards.
My question was pretty similar, because I know Alex had mentioned, sand or getting plugged up. You had mentioned, sand or dirt penetrating from the outside. Now I was going to mention on the inside. So you're 100% certain sand, because we do have a lot of problem with sand coming in our water here. It's going to flush through there.
That's right. If you got a little bit of sand at the bottom of your DRI unit, it's not going anywhere. I mean, if it stayed there, it's not going to hurt the DRI unit at all. Right?
Okay. Also, in terms of mature trees, you said a transition period of maybe a year. Is that?
Yeah, mature trees, you want to put 4 DRI units.
4 units for mature trees. Is there a range there in terms of the age of the tree? At what point?
We'll go over that. And so the canopy, based on the size of your canopy, how big your canopy is, that's going to determine how far from the base of your tree you're going to put your DRI units.
Okay.
Okay.
So that'll be length in terms of distance from the tree trunk, and how many. But what about in terms of a transition period? If you got a pecan tree that's 40 years old versus a 10-year-old, how long is it going to take to transition over?
Okay, so a pecan tree that's 40 years old, I would still have your surface water available, because that's where all your feeder roots are. Your tree is used to getting fed there. So you've got this great big hungry tree, living organism, and now you're saying, okay, now I only want to feed you on two sides. You've got 2 DRI units on each side, but you're saying I want you to just eat here. The tree has to take some time to build extra capillary root growth there to be able to feed off those 2 sides. So the first year, you're going to want to have surface supplemental irrigation. Now, you don't want to give the tree everything it wants. You do want to stress it a little bit, because I was telling Diego, your trees are like thoroughbred racehorses. If you kept them in their stall and gave them everything that they wanted, they're not going to be very good racehorses. But you want to take them out and you want to stress them a little bit, and you want to get them to get deeper roots, and you can find out exactly what it takes farming to get these trees so that they're perfect. And once you do, you will have perfect trees from that point on. And you'll know that, look, I don't have to worry about next year. I'm going to do exactly what I did this year. And I know exactly how much it's going to cost me for nutrients. I know exactly how much it's going to cost for water. It's going to cost me almost nothing for weed abatement. When we talk about gophers, we put DRI units on walnuts that were infested with gophers. Within 2 years, there were no more gophers. Why is that? Because gophers they like the smell of water. And they like all that grass that's on the surface, the weeds that grow. That's what they eat. They like the nuts too. But the thing is, if they don't have the ground cover, and if they don't have the smell of the water, and if they don't have just the grass to eat, they're going to go somewhere else where they have that. So basically, all the gophers moved out. Simple as that.
So they answered one of my questions already about the sand and all that. The other one is, what's the lifespan on these?
Lifespan. Okay, so these are made out of recycled tires. We know that you can put them in the ground and they don't begin to decay for at least 80 years. Unless if you run epoxy through them, or if you leave them out in the sunlight. Sunlight destroys everything. So if you left them on the surface of the ground for an entire season, they're going to become brittle, all right? But if you bury them in the ground away from the sun, they will last the life of your tree. You put them in, you get them going, and that's it. All you have to do then is maintain that bulb of saturation.